There was a time when Benjamin Carter had everything. A beautiful home in an upscale neighborhood in Atlanta, a luxury car in the driveway, a thriving investment portfolio, and a wife named Diana who wore designer clothes and hosted dinner parties for their wealthy friends on Friday evenings. Life was polished and comfortable and everything that the world tells you success is supposed to look like. Benjamin had worked hard for all of it and he was proud of what he had built. He had no reason to believe that any of it would ever change. Then one Tuesday morning it all fell apart. A single investment decision, one that had seemed brilliant and promising just weeks before, collapsed overnight. The market moved in a direction nobody had predicted and Benjamin watched his wealth disappear in a matter of hours the way sand disappears through open fingers. He made phone calls and sent emails and sat in front of computer screens until his eyes burned but there was nothing to be done. By the end of that week he had lost almost everything he had spent 15 years building. The accounts were nearly empty. The business was gone. The life he had constructed so carefully had crumbled like it was made of paper all along. Benjamin fell into a darkness he had never known before. Depression settled over him like a heavy coat he could not take off no matter how warm the day was. He stopped going out. He stopped returning calls. He stopped caring about the things he had once cared about deeply. And in that emptiness he found the only thing that seemed to dull the pain even slightly, which was food. He ate when he was sad and he ate when he was anxious and he ate when he woke up at 3 in the morning staring at the ceiling thinking about everything he had lost. It was not something he decided to do. It was something that simply happened, the way a flood happens, quietly at first and then all at once. Over the following months Benjamin gained weight rapidly. His clothes stopped fitting. His face changed. His energy disappeared. He would sit in his armchair for hours at a time doing nothing and feeling nothing except the dull ache of a life that no longer resembled the one he had planned. Diana watched all of this with growing frustration. She had not signed up for this version of her husband and she made sure he knew it. One evening she stood in the doorway of the living room and told him sharply to get his act together and asked him if he had seen himself in the mirror lately. Benjamin said nothing. He looked at his hands. Diana shook her head and walked away. But things did not get better. They got worse. The eating continued and the weight continued to climb and the man who had once walked into rooms with confidence and ease now avoided mirrors entirely and rarely left the house. Diana's patience wore thinner with each passing week until one evening she came downstairs with a suitcase in her hand and fury in her eyes. She told him he looked like nonsense, that she was ashamed to be seen with him, and that she was done. She was filing for divorce. Benjamin stood up from his chair and begged her not to go. He told her he needed her help, that he could not do this alone, that if she would just stay he would fight his way back and get on his feet again. But her face did not soften. She picked up her bag and walked toward the front door and paused with her hand on the handle and turned back one last time. She told him that he had destroyed himself completely and that nobody could fix what he had become. She told him it was simply impossible. And then she walked out and closed the door behind her. Benjamin stood alone in that big quiet house and felt the silence close around him like walls. For a long time he did not move. He replayed her words over and over in his mind and each time they landed like stones. Nobody can fix you. It is simply impossible. He thought those words would finish him off entirely. And for a while they almost did. He sank even deeper into himself and the weeks blurred together into a gray shapeless stretch of time where nothing seemed to matter and nothing seemed worth the effort of beginning. But something strange happened in the dead of one particular night. Benjamin woke up suddenly at 3 in the morning the way he often did and lay there in the darkness and heard Diana's voice in his head saying, "Do you see yourself in the mirror?" And for the first time instead of feeling crushed by those words he felt something different stir underneath them. Something quiet and stubborn and deeply tired of being defeated. He got up slowly and walked to the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror for the first time in months. He looked at himself for a long time without looking away. He did not like what he saw. But he decided in that moment, standing alone in the bathroom at 3 in the morning, that this would be the last night he let himself disappear. The next morning he called a doctor. It was a small step and a hard one, and his hands shook a little when he dialed the number, but he made the call. The doctor was kind and straightforward and did not make him feel ashamed. Together they made a plan. Benjamin began slowly, embarrassingly slowly at first, changing what he ate and how he moved and how he spent his hours. There were days when it felt completely impossible, and days when he went backward, and days when he sat on the edge of his bed and could not find a single reason to continue. But Diana's words were always there. Nobody can fix you. And every time he heard them in his mind, he used them the way you use a fire, not to burn yourself down but to keep yourself warm enough to keep going. He found a small part-time job to keep his mind occupied and his days structured. He read books about investment and finance in the evenings. He walked every morning even when his body protested, and even when the neighbors looked at him with expressions he pretended not to notice. Month by month, slowly and without any fanfare, Benjamin Carter began to rebuild. Not just his body but his discipline, his focus, his sense of who he was underneath all the things he had lost. The weight came off gradually the way it had come on, quietly and then all at once. His mind sharpened. His energy returned. He started making small careful investments again, nothing reckless, nothing rushed, just steady and smart and patient. And one by one the pieces of a new life began to click into place. 5 years later Benjamin pulled a brand new car into a parking spot outside a restaurant in Midtown Atlanta. He stepped out looking lean and healthy and sharp, a different man entirely from the one who had stood in front of a bathroom mirror in the middle of the night 5 years before. He was heading inside to celebrate a business deal that had just closed, one that had taken 2 years of careful planning and that had paid off beyond what he had allowed himself to hope for. He was almost at the door when he heard a voice behind him call his name. He turned around. It was Diana. She was standing on the sidewalk staring at him with wide eyes and an expression that moved through several emotions in the space of a few seconds. She said his name again and asked how he had lost all that weight, and told him he looked absolutely amazing and that he was clearly doing well again financially. Her voice had a trembling edge to it and her eyes were filling with tears. She said quietly, almost to herself, that she should not have left. That she had made a terrible mistake. That she was sorry. Benjamin looked at her for a long moment. There was no anger in his face and no satisfaction either. Just a calm and steady warmth that came from a man who had walked through fire and come out knowing exactly who he was. He smiled at her and said thank you. Diana looked confused and asked what he was thanking her for. He told her he was thanking her for leaving. She shook her head slowly, not understanding, and he explained it simply and without any cruelty in his voice. He told her that the day she walked out was the day he finally had no choice but to face himself. That her words, the harshest ones, the ones that were supposed to break him, had become the very fuel that made him refuse to stay broken. That losing her had been the beginning of finding himself. He told her that her leaving was the best thing that had ever happened to him. He wished her well. He meant it genuinely, and then he turned and walked into the restaurant to celebrate the life he had built entirely on his own. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are unknowingly giving us the greatest gift. The rejection, the abandonment, the cruel words spoken in anger, these things can either bury you or become the foundation you build something extraordinary upon. The choice is always yours. Nobody can decide what your pain means except you. And if you are in your lowest moment right now, please hear this. You are not finished. You are not impossible to fix. You are simply not done yet. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today.